Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today I'm going to be talking about Boosh, Grave Empire, Book 1 in the all-new trilogy by Richard Swan,
Stop looking at me, Swan!
The Great Silence. And starting off, I just want to go ahead and thank the author and Orbit and Netgalley for providing me with an advanced copy of this in order that I may, that is a present subjunctive purpose oot clause, read this in advance because I love Swan himself and his books. So this is a sequel 200 years in the future from The Empire of the Wolf, and it is Flintlock Fantasy, which, as you know, because you're a longtime fan of the channel, I have been on a quest of sorts for the best of Flintlock Fantasy, because I just don't think that Promise of Blood should be the poster child for this particular genre. No offense to Brian McClellan or the Powder Mage, or people that like the Powder Mage, but I did not enjoy it that much. So, yeah, without wasting more time,
see ya after the jump.
Let's talk about Grave Empire. So, again, this is 200 years into the future, and it takes place in the same world on Sova and, its environs. And just starting off, that you do not have to read the Empire of the Wolf trilogy, which is Justice of Kings, Tyranny of Faith, Trial of Empire, in order to read this book. You don't. There are references to, like, Helena from the first book and Von Volt. There are some, but almost, like, nothing major to where I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, I had to go look some stuff. I'm like, is that a reference to whatever? And there are a couple, references, especially, like, locations. So if you have not read Richard Swan and you don't feel like catching up, this is actually a great place to start. So there are actually two main POVs in this, and reading the back, I thought it was just going to be the one, because the main one that most people know about, and if you've seen any of the artwork for, like, Broken Binding, it's just incredible artwork. You see the armored sharks and Orca and whatever, which is freaking awesome. The main character is Renata, who is the vice diplomat or ambassador to the Stygian race, which is the race of mermen that no one has really ever seen. They just kind of know are there over in, like, the recesses of the sea or whatever. The book actually starts with the second POV character, which is Peter, and Peter is a newly commissioned soldier in the Sovan army. His dad bought him a lieutenancy or a captaincy, something. His dad bought him an officership, and he shows up way out in Das Hinterlands on the frontier at the end of the world. And his character was an unexpected surprise. All of Peter's chapters begin with him riding home to his father, and Peter is just such a richly drawn character of, he's this young rich guy who has never really had any worries in his life, and this commission was bought for him so that he can prove that he's going to make something of himself. But this is just the wrong time to join the Sovan military way out in Das Hinterlands. So he is out of his depth and desperately wants to be respected by the soldiers under his command, and he wants to do a good job for Sova, for his father. He wants to prove that he's up to the task, that he's not just this spoiled rich kid, and all of that stuff is just what he's wrestling with. And it's really interesting to watch his character growth as it goes on, seeing, where he is at kind of the end of his arc here, than at the beginning. Really, really good stuff. And so while Peter begins in Das Hinterlands at the end of the world, Renata starts in Sova. And if you've read that previous trilogy, Sova is the capital, is where everything happens. And recently, the Republic of Sova, it was the Sovan Empire, the Republic of Sova has voted to reinstate the emperor, and so a new empress has kind of taken hold, and so that's kind of a new thing. They're transitioning out of, they were the empire, now they're the republic, and now they're transitioning back into kind of like a constitutional emperorship, I guess. And Renata is just a young woman who is trying to make her bones in the diplomacy world, and again, she's the under ambassador, the under diplomat to the mermen, and no one really believes in the mermen, and no one takes them seriously. So she is constantly, because she's not even the ambassador, she's the vice ambassador. So she's constantly the butt of jokes and derision, until, of course, one day she is given a quest of sorts, and everything just kind of spirals out from there. And these two characters, and partway through the book, we get a third POV that is not. It's gross. I don't like the third POV. With these two POVs, with Renata and Peter, Swan gives the stuff that I love about this kind of book. So with Renata, we have diplomacy, like geopolitics and how an empire building and empire running, and the logistics of basically everything from fielding an army to the decisions, both major and minor, that have to be made to keep the cogs turning, and as well as logistics. Richard Swan is second only to K.J. Parker talking about military logistics and making it interesting and making us understand how like wars are won behind the battlefield, behind the battle lines, with with everything that goes into fielding an army and not just the army itself. I don't know why Swan hasn't read K.J. Parker, but he freaking needs to. And then over with Peter, we have the Napoleonic set-piece battles that I just love. Like, Swan is on the top of his game with some of the, like, flintlock Napoleonic-style battles that we have. And, eventually the POVs, because, they're not all... Renata's not just in Sova the whole time, and so things more kind of merge, and some battles happen in Renata's section, and I just love it. Like, I love the flintlock battles. It's so good. In addition, for, again, the things that occur kind of bleed together eventually, but to start with, Peter is also the POV with which Swan drip feeds us an IV of absolutely like bone-chilling horror crap. I don't know what Swan's obsession is with horror, but it's good here. Like, there are some genuinely scary chapters. In fact, some of the horror stuff that comes is actually like eerily reminiscent of like books like 3 and 4 of the Monarchies of God, a trilogy by Paul Kearney, which is just wonderful. None of y'all have read it because you won't. But maybe one day. Maybe one day Joanna or Philip or Jimmy or Murphy will read it, and then you guys will read it. But it's quite good. Don't read the 5th book. Waste your time, and just read books 1 through 4. But yeah, it was eerily similar to that in just like the vibes, some stuff happening. It was just and it was creepy. It's creepy in the Monarchies of God. It's creepy here, and I don't know, just like all the horror stuff is just stepped up to where it is perfectly eerie. And I want to say, in this book, I think that Swan walks the absolute perfect line between this cosmic supernatural horror and these Napoleonic flintlock diplomatic, geopolitical, military events happening in the real world. Blended together perfectly. The supernatural kind of elements kind of took center stage a lot more than I wish they would have in the previous trilogy, and so I don't know how that line's going to be walked in the remaining books, but here it's walked really, really well. It keeps everything because when it's like regular people versus Cthulhu, cosmic entities, it's really like, well, what are you gonna do? Like, these things, But here it just keeps it kind of at arm's length, where it's just terrifying. Like, anything could kind of happen. Just a really, really perfect blend there. Like this book is just, Swan has just stepped up his game. For those of you who did not enjoy the fact that the first trilogy was first person from Helena's point of view, this is completely third person, so you can't complain about that anymore. And again, because Swan has literally studied this stuff, his geopolitical stuff, his military logistical stuff, all of this contributes to having a world that really, really feels lived in. I don't know, and there are of course I do, because we've all read fantasy books, but there are certain fantasy books where the outside world does not exist beyond the province or area that we are currently in. This always feels like everything's interconnected, that the world has other people who live in other places that aren't just where we are. Swan is very, very, very good at that. So if that's your thing, that's another thing I can recommend for this particular book. And so his world building here is really, really, really good. I should also mention there's an autistic character who I knew was autistic before Swan told me she was autistic, and she's good. I love that character. I also really like that there's a sense of urgency running through all three of our POV sections, and each one, and what I love is that there's a mystery in here that is difficult to unravel, and each POV section has a piece of it, and we get the whole picture as, you know, we see all three of them, but then the POV people are lacking the piece that the other POV people have. And so watching them try to put it together while we, in fact, try to put it together as well is really, really good. I love the mystery in this book, all combined with the horror to just, again, provide this sense of urgency that keeps you turning the page. And also, a caveat, there is a lot of horror elements in this book, and also some of it's gross. Some of this book's gross. So please just be aware that some of it's gross. Yeah. Some of it's just gross. It's yucky, as my wife would say. It's yucky. Now, because, it's called Grave Empires in the title, this book talks a lot about empire and what it takes to sustain it. Is that ever a good thing? The effects of empire on uncivilized territory, as KJ Parker explores this a lot, its effect on savages, the cost of empire, and when you have an empire, can anything else matter? One of the main principles of Sovan diplomacy, as they say, is Sova first in all things. And when you have to have the mindset of the empire first in everything, like is there room for human compassion? Is there room for human morality and systems of ethics? Is there any wiggle room for doing what is the right thing? Or, since you are a Sovan diplomat, is Sova first in all things? Is that the right thing? And by showing this human frailty of extending what you call compassion, which may be less than optimal for the empire. Like, say, let's say you're cutting these people a deal because you feel bad for them, and that undermines Sovan supremacy, and because of that, maybe some people back in Sova or in the surrounding territories, maybe they're going to starve or have a harder life or whatever, all because you were soft on these people. And this is another thing that Swan does really, really well. He is very, very good at showing the effects on empire of different events, both minor and major. So what I just described is a minor thing. Like, let's say you don't make a deal with this one region that is, often thus hinterlands that you wouldn't really think is important, and yet because of that, it just has these domino effects of, well, now the people around them think the empire's weak, and so they rebel, and then they're primary for farmland, and so now there's a food shortage back in the empire. He's really, really good at showing that, like losing a harbor, the massive casualties that it inflicts when an empire or strong nation state loses a major harbor. That's catastrophic for empire. So Swan is really, really good at that, and really good at asking these questions about empire with a capital E versus its functionaries. Renata talks about how war is Sova's favorite form of diplomacy. War in the Curie, war with the Casimir. Everyone's idea of diplomacy is to threaten, to shoot, to bludgeon terms out of your enemy. Capitulation is the only acceptable outcome. And yeah, that is the current activities that Sova is engaged in. And her superior, the actual ambassador, I love the discussion about diplomacy. He talks about how the empire views people in terms of problems to be solved. The problem with the Imperial Office is that it views every race of people on this world as a problem to be solved, a dog to be brought to heel. It thinks in terms of administrative ledgers, accounts, mathematical equations, supply trains, and tons of powder. It sees the Khazar and the Pagans and the Casimirs and the Mermen not as pieces in a common lot, but either as tools or as enemies. Does the gardener negotiate with the rake? Does the farmer entreat the plowshare? So good. Like, I love this kind of discussion. And of course, you can't talk about empire without just the encroaching upon neighboring lands, about how empire is by its nature all-consuming, because it has to keep expanding in order to feed its insatiable appetite. And Peter muses that even way out in Das Hinterlands, that there is no land too far away from the capital of Sova that cannot eventually be affected by the empire, be brought into the fold, to where all of the disparate people, the savages, are brought to heel under the Sovan yoke, where maybe now they are this strange, frightening, unfamiliar, culture or civilization that can in, a decade or two, doesn't matter how long, eventually will become, it will be no different than walking the streets of Sova with rituals that are converted and subsumed into the Sovan way. Yeah, there may be, little picadillos and variances, like regional variances, but the culture is pretty homogenously Sovan. And I've been reading a lot about that. Similar, like it's hard to read books about empire, good books about empire, that don't also explore cultural subsummation of, the assimilation effect of, one dominant culture over the losers. And Swan does that, asks these questions really well here. And again, I can't, it's a really good blend of flintlock stuff, Napoleonic War stuff, ideas about loyalty to the state, independence, sovereignty, and, of course, explorations of power between the empire and those they deem as savages. There's magic here. The stuff from Empire of the Wolf, like the Emperor's Voice and all of that stuff, that is all banned, so we don't get any of that, which is cool that Swan is taking us in a completely different direction as far as the magic is concerned.
Stop looking at me, Swan!
But guys, there's some weird stuff going on in this. And I'm just going to say, the Knacker Man. And that's all I'm going to say. So guys, this book is really good. The Flintlock books that I think are the 1,000 Names, which is the first book of the Shadow Campaigns, and Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky, 1,000 Names by Django Wexler. Those are really probably my two favorite Flintlock books that I recommend to people who like Flintlock fantasy. In addition, Shadows of the Apt is also quite good and kind of fits the genre, certainly fits the vibe like I'm talking about. And so I would put Grave Empire up with those two books any day. And is my hope that Grave Empire, that the next two books are just as good, if not better, than this first one, so that The Great Silence can perhaps occupy the top spot as the seminal work of Flintlock fantasy, that I can just be like, oh, you like Flintlock fantasy? Freaking read this crap. So yeah, I give this book 3 Shamus, 2 Ariels, and 4 mighty cannons from the 1990s Battle Mat, Hasbro, Parker Brothers, whoever made it, edition of Battle Masters. And if you get that reference, you know what? You get a personal point. I, again, like to thank Netgalley and Orbit and Swan for the advanced copy. I will be interviewing Swan here before the book comes out in February. Get out there and pre-order this book. It's so good, guys. It's so good. So that is it for me for today. And as always, information about my Patreon and Discord is down in the description. And I'll see you next time, guys.